Welcome to the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to practice the English language, learn about the British accent and culture, with me, your host, Michael Lavers. Hello and welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. Please excuse the temporary background I've got here if you're watching the video version, but I've got an exciting episode today because I'm talking with Julie, who is a teacher from Canada, now living in Dubai. We had a really good conversation today all about her home country of Canada. And I know you're going to enjoy it because I enjoyed it a lot too. And I learned a lot about Canada as well. And in this episode, we talk about many different things, including weather, accents and dialects. We talk about Canadian English accent versus American accent, what the differences might be. We talk a bit about the connection between Canada and France, and also whether you need to know any French when going to Canada. We also talk about the Arabic language a little bit because Julie is now in Dubai. We cover the Canadian mindset and how Canadian people think and some mannerisms that they might have. We talk about food in Canada, where you should travel in Canada. And finally, on the bonus podcast, on the private episode, we talk about slang. So some Canadian and British slang. And there's actually a few things they have in common as well. So we've got a lot packed into this somewhat short episode, but I know you're going to enjoy it. And I did just mention the private episode. Remember, if you do want to access the private episodes, you can become a member at levelupenglish.school. Click on the members button at the top, and for £10 a month, just £10, you can access the private episodes as well as podcast transcripts and many more courses there, including weekly group classes with me. But okay, well, I hope you enjoy the episode. I'm going to get right into it now. So here we go. Let's get into it. Hello, English learners. Welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm also very glad to be joined by a guest teacher today, Julie. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And it's actually the first time you and I are talking. So it's very nice to finally see you face to face and talk.
Yeah, or screen to screen, whatever you like.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to talk with you for sure. What time is it where you are now?
I'm in Dubai. It's 12:15 now, so around lunchtime. And I think you're 3 hours behind, right?
Yes, it's 9 o'clock here, which kind of explains my still like sleepy eyes, but hopefully that's not too obvious.
No, it's not.
How long have you been in Dubai then?
I've been in Dubai for about 7 years now, but I've lived abroad for 12 since 2010. So quite a while, but yeah, in Dubai for about 7.
That's amazing. And you just said before we recorded that you're from Toronto, Canada?
Yes, I'm from Toronto. I was born and raised there, but I moved abroad, as I said, in 2010 to teach, and I've been kind of moving around from place to place since then. And yeah, I have lived away from Canada since then, but I spent a majority of my life there.
Wow, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
I've never been to either of those places, but from what I
Okay.
hear, Canada can get quite cold, Dubai can get quite hot. Like, did you find that
Yes.
transition difficult from cold to hot, or was it a welcome one?
They're polar opposites in terms of weather. Canada is super cold and Dubai gets extremely hot. Now it's summer, so it reaches around 50 degrees maximum. But honestly, I prefer very hot as opposed to very cold because at least it's sunny and the weather affects my mood, I think, quite a lot, which I didn't realize before. So I definitely prefer hot. Everything is air conditioned, so it's a little bit dry. But in Canada, honestly, it's a lot more gray than I ever realized. Now, when I go back, I don't know how it is for you in the UK, if it's a similar situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always grey here. And I've noticed that too, because I think that's why like British people love to talk about the weather, because
Yeah.
when it is one of those rare sunny days, everyone goes crazy, even if it's only like, 18 degrees Celsius. People go to the beach, they get, their clothes off, they go swimming.
Yeah.
Other countries might think that's weird, but I think it's just because living in a cloudy climate, you're so sensitive
Yeah,
to any sunlight, So I can relate to
exactly.
that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's so hot. Do you have like a heat wave now, or is it just your life? Because at the moment in the
Uh,
UK, it's super hot.
I've seen actually a lot of people posting online about like how hot it is in the UK, and I've seen videos and stuff. We don't have a heat wave. Like, I think it's actually cooler than it normally is this
Mm.
summer. I've been able to like still go outside in the evenings and not be dying of heat exhaustion. So it's been decent compared to how it usually is. Like, it's hot, but it's okay. Like, if as long as you adjust and you get used to it, it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Yeah, I guess it's what you're used to as well. Like we're not
Yeah.
used to that temperature here, and of course we don't really have air conditioning, so I'm just melting here.
Yeah. But what is the like maximum temperature there now during the heat wave?
It depends. In London, it's always like 5 degrees hotter than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I'm in London now, and I think it got to like 34 last week or something like that.
Yeah.
I know last night, even at like the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, it was 24, which doesn't sound too
Okay.
bad, but I think it's quite horrible when there's no air conditioning.
Yeah, actually, I spent some time in the UK,
Yeah.
and even though Canada is very cold, it was like a different cold. It was like a wet cold. I was cold like in my bones, but Canada's a drier cold. So I find it actually like the temperature is lower, but it was more manageable for me. Like in the UK, I felt like I couldn't get warm. Like I
Oh,
could not
interesting.
warm up ever. Yeah, it
Okay, that
was
makes me feel
frustrating.
better about my complaining now. But
Yeah, no, so I understand what you're saying. It's different.
okay. Well, I wanted to talk to you today all about Canada, your home country, even though maybe you haven't lived there for a while by the sounds of it. But I thought it could be good to talk about it and
Yeah.
a little bit about language, culture, travel, that kind of stuff. I want to introduce it
Yeah.
for people who might not know. So maybe we could let's start with language and dialect. We recently did like an Instagram reel, right, about
Yeah.
American and British and a bit of Canadian English as well. So, how would you say Canadian English differs from, well, American and British?
I think that in terms of pronunciation, obviously, Canadian and American are much closer. I think that the Canadian accent and pronunciation is generally clearer and easier for people to understand from what I've been told. People always say, "Oh, your pronunciation is so good," and they think I'm American. But I think America has a lot of different accents as well, and so does the UK, more so than Canada. So pronunciation and accent are a lot more simple in Canada, I guess. But we are Commonwealth and we have like the Queen on everything. So there's an influence of British English in terms of spelling. Um, and I think in just that, basically that's it. Like slang and all of that is influenced heavily by America, I would say. So British slang and Canadian slang are quite different. Vocabulary, there's some differences as well. It's nothing major. Like once you learn the differences, it's nothing like crazy to understand. I think the biggest difference would be the accent, pronunciation, and slang. I would say like regional language and dialect.
I think I'd
Yeah.
like to come back to slang later. That could be
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, maybe I should say for the listeners, uh, even myself as like a native English speaker, I've only really been able to differentiate Canadian and American accent in the last few years. I think for most of my life they've been the same, and now I guess I'm
Yeah.
starting to hear some differences. But do you have any idea like what could be a easy way or the biggest way to tell them apart?
To tell the difference, honestly, it's a really good point that you made. Most people, even English speakers, cannot tell the difference unless they've spent time in both places or know a lot of people from both places. So the accents that everyone listening probably hears on TV and in movies, they're American, but they're very neutral accents. So there are like Southern American accents, which are completely different. So when you get used to that, that's kind of how my accent or pronunciation is. It's similar to somebody from a part of America that has a neutral accent. But sorry, your question was how to tell them apart.
Yeah.
Honestly, not without, you can tell them apart once you get used to it. So it was the same for me when I went to the UK or before I ever went to the UK. I only had the impression of an accent from London, like your accent. And I just thought everybody sounded like that. And then of course, when I got there, I understood like, no, it's completely different in the north. Like there are so many different accents around the UK. So I only understood when I spent time there, the more people I met from different places. So I would say there's not really a trick unless you just spend time getting to know the difference.
Yeah, that is a good point. I think you have to have
Yeah.
immersion, you have to be exposed to the accent. There's one sound that I had in mind that I don't know. Let me know if it's maybe a bit offensive, but I think this is more of a stereotype that the US has on Canadian English. And it's particularly like it comes out when Canadians say the word about. Do you know what I'm talking
I've
about?
heard this, but I don't think I have that. So I say about like that. So I don't think it's crazy,
Okay.
but it's honestly, it is a stereotype and it isn't. There are like some areas in Canada where the accent is a little bit stronger and you can kind of hear that. But honestly, it's not as strong as people make it out to be. Like it's an exaggeration. It's not offensive. I think it doesn't matter much. But yeah, it's a little bit of a stereotype. It's not really true.
Yeah. I have heard something like that before. So what we're talking about is, I guess it's the vowel rather than saying how
Yeah.
I would say maybe about. It might be more like a oo, like a boot, something like that.
Yeah. But I don't, I feel like I can hear the Canadian accent more now that I don't live there anymore. But I still don't hear it as strong as people say it is. So
Mhm, mhm.
I don't think it's, yeah, I don't think it would be that noticeable.
Yeah, people like to exaggerate. Same with British, they'll
Yeah.
say like bottle of water, but not many people
Yeah.
say it that way, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about French language? Because I know a little bit, but how is the French language connected to Canada, and how widely is French spoken there?
So French is spoken mainly in Quebec. It is our second official language. So all Canadians, at least from my generation, had to study French in school. So we studied French as a second language. And of course, it's on all of our legal documents. Everything legal is in English and French and so on. But a majority of Canada is English speaking. I would say a vast majority. It's mainly in Quebec, and then there are a few other places that are French speaking fully, although the people do speak English as well. Yeah, I wish that I had taken French seriously as a student. Honestly, it was like an obligation, and I could have been a much better French speaker than I am. So now my French and many people from Toronto, their French is very, very basic or possibly non-existent. But we do have French immersion in school. I don't know if you've heard of this, where so basically your subjects are in French. So my
Mm.
nieces now, they study their core subjects in French as well. So they will be closer to bilingual than I was. But a majority of people are English speaking, although French is the official second language.
Okay. Do you think it's actually useful to know any French there? Because we have like Wales in the UK, and like
Yeah.
people there speak Welsh. Welsh is quite popular as well as English. But I don't know how useful it is. I think people like to speak it with each other, like
Yeah.
especially older generations. But as far as I know, you don't really need it. You can do without it just fine. I wonder if it's
Yes.
similar.
Okay, no, in that sense, I think it's a little bit different. So, if you live in Quebec or in an English, in a French speaking part of Canada, then it's necessary, of course. However, if you spoke French and English, like for people listening who might want to move to Canada or to visit Canada, I think you need English. Absolutely.
Mhm.
But if you happen to move to a French speaking part, then you need French to get a job. If you can speak French and English, you can get a job where you use both languages, and then you'll probably get a higher salary. So it's absolutely not necessary. Like it's the way that I live in Dubai, but I don't need to speak Arabic here. I need to speak English, so it's the same. Like Canada's, of course, English speaking, but it's just sort of an added benefit if you can. But I've never had an issue in my life because I didn't speak French. So
Okay. Oh, that's good to
yeah.
know. It's 'cause do you know any Arabic, by the way? Have you picked any up? The main
Just some
language is English,
words.
but okay.
Honestly, I'm ashamed to say, I just know like a few words and phrases, the things that I hear. It's also because honestly, the local population here is very small, and a majority of the people here are expats. So the language for work and business and communication is English.
Mhm,
So no,
mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
maybe there's not much need for it, but okay. No,
Yeah,
I'm just
it
wondering.
would be
That's all.
nice. Yeah, I feel
It's a
bad,
huge
but
thing.
yeah.
Well, one of my favorite topics I thought we could move on to is culture and mindset, because I
Mhm.
think it's much more abstract, maybe, but I think it's quite
Yeah.
interesting to think about. So, this might be a hard question, but how would you describe the Canadian mindset of the people? How could it differ to other
Yeah.
countries?
It's not a hard question, actually. I think that Canadians, okay, of course I'm generalizing, but Canadians in general are very tolerant and quite respectful people. Not everybody, of course, not everybody is nice, but Canadians, yes, are very tolerant and I would say quite polite. Um, I think that there's also some negative aspects. Of course, I'm starting off with the positive, but yeah, I would say in a nutshell that Canadians are tolerant and generally quite polite. On the negative side, I think that we can be too polite, we can be too
Mm,
nice, and sometimes there needs to be a line drawn. And I feel like as a country, we sort of struggle with that sometimes. Yes, I don't know.
that's
That's,
interesting.
yeah.
And
Do you
this,
have an impression of Canadians or Canadian people or culture? Like, what is your impression?
yeah, I mean, a little one. Again, I've never been to Canada. I don't have any Canadian friends, really, in the
Okay.
real world. So it's very limited, but I guess a lot of it comes from stereotypes and maybe some people I see in movies and stuff. But the one big stereotype is that Canadians say sorry all the time,
Yeah,
and
that's
they'll
accurate.
always help people, which is a good one, right? Good stereotype to have. Like if you break down in the snow, there'll always be people there to help you.
Yeah,
But I don't
this
really
is
have
true.
any bad thing. Maybe from my point of view, you might have some unusual food. Do you think that could be true?
Yeah, the food is not okay. Before we go into food, I wanna ask. No, the culture. I want to say because I spent some time in the UK as well, so I
Yeah,
want to
let's
maybe
compare.
compare, if that's okay, the cultures and my impression of them, and you can tell me if that's accurate. So
Mhm.
I didn't have any issues like assimilating into culture in the UK, but I did notice some differences in the culture. So I think generally people were polite and all of that. But I found people, specifically in London, to not be very helpful to me when I needed basic help, directions, and things. Like, I know it's a city, but people like did not have time to stop or did not. I was asking directions, and it happened a couple of times. So this was one, but I guess it's a bigger city, and that can be said for any city. I don't think it's a reflection of the culture. Um, but I found that generally people were more reserved in the UK than in Canada. So we're nice, but also like expressive in terms of
Mm.
emotion a little bit more. I don't know if you agree
That makes sense to
with
me, yeah, because I
being
know
reserved.
I think Americans generally are quite outgoing.
Yeah.
People from North America, I mean, quite outgoing and
Yeah.
open. Yeah. I mean, my perspective is, yeah, London is so different from the rest of the country. I've
Yeah,
lived in London for 2 years, and it kind of feels like another country almost because the people are different.
definitely.
Um, People were a little bit less patient here. So I guess it
Yeah.
depends who you ask. But my general impression of people here in the UK is they seem very cold and unfriendly. But then, if usually, generally, if you ask them a question, they'll instantly be happy and helpful and friendly.
Mm.
I think you have to kind of just get past that initial interaction.
Yeah.
But it does depend who you ask. Like sometimes I'll ask someone and they'll just kind of grunt at me, like, uh. And that's a
Yeah.
common London thing, I think.
But that's just London because I was in some smaller
Oh
towns.
yeah.
I spent some time in Plymouth and in
Oh,
Scotland,
do
in
you know I was born
Perth.
in Plymouth?
No, I
Yeah, I was
didn't.
born
So
there.
my first time ever in the UK, I was in Plymouth, and my impression
Wow,
was so good. The people were so
I
nice
love Plymouth.
and
Yeah.
so friendly, and I was like, "Wow, this is so great." And then when I went back, I went to London, and I was like, "This is not." But I'm happy that Plymouth was my first impression because the
Oh,
people
cool.
were honestly really lovely. It was really nice.
That's great. Did you like the city as well? I mean, it's kind of got
I liked it.
mixed
Yeah,
opinions. Yeah.
yeah,
I
I
I,
liked it. I liked it quite a bit.
I love like the park by the sea. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's
Wow.
really nice. You're the first person that I've ever met aside from the people I met during the first visit, but yeah, it's a lovely place. It's
Yeah,
really
it's a small
nice.
city, but yeah, it's nice. I guess we can go back to that food one.
Yes. Now we can talk about food.
So tell us some like I mean, I'm not one to talk. British food is known for not being great, but tell us about some popular Canadian dishes.
Honestly, there are not many. I'm going to mention the one that everyone probably knows and has heard of, but I have to say that Canadian food is influenced by other places. Okay, so there are really good restaurants and stuff in Toronto and in Canada, but they are cuisines from other places, kind of like how London is or New York. You have a similar vibe. Canadian food itself, there's not much happening. So we have a famous dish called poutine, but it's from the French part of Canada, and it's not a it's junk food. It's good, but it's like French fries and gravy and cheese. It's good, but it's like embarrassing to say that that's a national dish because it's French fries. It's just like mushy French fries. So we have pretty like simple meals the way that we eat in general. Like we have for dinner and lunch, let's say we usually have like a protein, so meat or fish or whatever, and then maybe rice or potatoes and vegetables. Like very simple. It's nothing crazy. So we're not known for food. Like we have good seafood, but
Mm.
yeah, like my family is Trinidadian, so I grew up eating Trinidadian food. Um, and then all the food I like is from other places. So we have like good produce and stuff, but our dishes, I wouldn't say that we have an amazing cuisine that you have to try. I
Okay,
guess
okay.
kind of similar
I
in
think
the
it's very
UK.
similar. Yeah, like I say, London's one of the best places for food, in my opinion. Just
Yeah.
not English food. The best
Yeah,
places for
like
other
you
food.
exactly. Like, I usually have other food. Like when I'm in Toronto, I have Thai food, I have
Yeah.
Chinese food. Like it's not really. So it's very anticlimactic, the food.
Okay. I've also heard of the word. Let me know if this is real or if someone just made this up. Poutineery. Is that where you go to get
It's
poutine?
real.
Yeah.
It's real. It's real. So actually now, okay, poutine has evolved. I shouldn't make it sound so negative. It is good. Like when I was a college student, I would get poutine from a food truck downtown where they would sell like French fries and hot dogs and stuff. And it was good. It was very good. Now they have shops, and they have like gourmet poutine. So you'll have like pulled pork and beef and other things. But essentially it's French fries with toppings. So at the end of the day, it's nothing like, you know, earth shattering. It's French fries, but yeah, it's there are poutineries, and you should try if you go to
Hmm.
Canada, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
nothing
It
amazing.
sounds a bit equivalent to like our fish and chips, how it's like a
Yes.
national dish. It's not super healthy and we don't
Yeah.
have it as much as people think we do, but it may be somewhat similar to
It's
that.
quite similar, yes, yes. In that
Yeah.
sense, yeah.
Okay. The final big topic I want to ask you about is travel, partly for my own selfish reasons, but I'm also
Mhm.
sure people listening might like to think about or dream about traveling there one day. So, first of all, like where would you recommend people go? Where are some good spots people should have on their bucket list there?
I think it depends what you like. So I'm from Toronto, so I would say to visit Toronto. But if you're not really a city person, then I would not recommend going to Toronto, although it's not a huge city. But I would say to visit British Columbia, to visit Vancouver and other places in British Columbia, because you kind of have the best of both worlds there. So you have a city, but you also have mountains and lakes. You can go hiking. There's a lot of things. Whereas in Toronto, you sort of have to go out of your way to get to nature if that's what you're looking for. The East Coast is also beautiful. Canada has tons of beautiful places. There are national parks and lakes and mountains, and the nature is incredible. But it really depends what you like. Like if you like skiing, you can go to Blue Mountain, a ski resort in the winter. It depends. So, what kind of things do you like?
You
Nature,
asking
I
me?
guess. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, nature. I think. Well, I mean, what I really like is like being somewhere in a city, but yeah, close to nature. So it sounds like so British Columbia might be good for
Yeah.
that, maybe.
Toronto, Vancouver, or you could also go to Montreal. Montreal is lovely because there's the influence of European architecture,
Oh wow.
whereas like the architecture in Canada is very underwhelming compared to England, compared to Europe in general. So at least in Montreal, you still have older buildings. So I would recommend going there. I think you would like that more.
Okay. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
architecture, and that's what I'm going to the US this year. But I'm going to like Boston
Nice.
because I feel like
Okay.
I just want to go somewhere with like really beautiful buildings and not,
Yeah.
some places which I won't name that I think are not so much like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I heard, I forget the exact percentage, but the vast majority of people in Canada live within so many miles from the border.
Yes.
Do you know that exactly by chance?
Yes. I don't know the exact number, but yes, the half of the country is empty. Okay, so basically, most people live in the south, like the bottom half of the country, and then it's very cold in the north. So, Canada's huge; it's massive, but the population is quite small compared to how big of a country it is. Uh, yeah, it's cold in the north. But if you go, I would recommend visiting in the summer or the fall or the spring. The winter for the first time honestly is quite a shock unless you're going like to go skiing. Then I would say to not go in the winter because it's pretty in your mind, but then when you're there and you actually have to get around, it's very unpleasant. So,
I don't know where this was exactly. I don't know, maybe a lot of Canada is like this or just one area. But I've seen like pictures where you've got a road and meters of snow on either side, like a wall of snow, and that
yeah,
doesn't look
there are
very
many
pleasant.
places like that. There are many places like it's pretty, like it's cool, but
Yeah.
then it's nice when the snow is fresh. When the snow is not fresh, it's not as picturesque. So there are many streets like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. So I'll be sure to go in the summer at some point. I find it really fascinating how, say in the UK, it's kind of plausible for me to visit most areas because it's not so big. So I feel like I've had a good
Yes.
experience, but Canada is so huge. I can't imagine living in a country where you haven't seen the vast majority of the country. Like, is there a lot of places
Yeah.
you still want to go, or are you more looking towards other
I,
countries?
when I was younger, I felt like, so I started traveling alone when I was 17. And when I was younger, I felt like, oh, my country will always be here. So there was no urge or need to travel around it. Now I've not seen like any places in Canada, honestly. I wanted to travel, and the minute I could, I just left.
Yeah.
So now I feel kind of bad, and I would really like to. There's so many places. I've not even been to British Columbia, and I have family there, which is again ridiculous. So I think that yeah, there's tons of places I would still like to visit, but it isn't the easiest country to travel around. Like in the UK, you can travel quite easily by train. It's pretty affordable. In Canada, the train rides are quite expensive. You have to fly from one side of the country to the other. Like it's not the easiest or cheapest. place to get around. So that's when I was younger and I had zero budget for traveling. It wasn't even an option. Like it was cheaper for me to leave, to go to another a country. So you have to plan it out. If you visit, you have to kind of plan your visit. You can't like in the UK, you can just sort of like hop on a train and go somewhere. Canada requires a little bit more planning.
Okay. And I imagine if you're going from west to east, you have to take a plane, really. That's probably what most people do, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Most people fly. It's like 5 hours or something.
Wow.
Like it's a long. I think it's like 5 hours. Yeah,
I think
it's a couple of hours.
there's nowhere in Europe you can go for that long. Like, if you go 5 hours from London anywhere, you're out of Europe. That's amazing, like, how
Yeah,
big it is.
it's big. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So maybe for people visiting, it might be easier just to stick in one area rather than plan
Yeah.
like a whole trip around unless you're driving a lot.
I would, depending on how long the trip is, you can go maybe to two places, but I would say to plan it, not just to go there and then say like, let's see. I would instead plan because also Canadians travel around Canada in the summer too. So if you're visiting and let's say you want to rent a cottage or go to a lake, a lot of those places are fully booked. So if you go, if you're visiting, definitely like at least do a quick search online, see what's available and stuff before. Yeah.
Okay, good advice, good advice. Anything else you think we should add before we move on from this one?
Uh, no, I think that's pretty much it. Canada's
Okay,
quite
yeah.
a civilized, it's a lovely place. It's a lovely place. But yeah, it is. No, I think that's it. I wish there was more to say about our food, honestly, but there's nothing. There's nothing else to say.
Is there good food in Dubai? Do you have like better cuisine now?
Yes, much better food in Dubai. Absolutely, much
Okay.
better. The restaurants in Canada are good, but they're expensive.
Yeah.
So you don't go to restaurants all the time, of course.
It's the same here. It's one thing I kind of regret about living in London because there's so many amazing restaurants, but
Yeah.
like you might be spending like a day's worth of your income just to go to one.
Going
So
to.
like I've lived here for 2 years and I think I've been out less than 5 times in 2 years to a meal
Oh
because
no.
it's just too much money.
That's very few. Okay, and that's another thing that I will say about honestly, yes, the restaurants in Canada they're nice, but they're expensive because you have the price that you see on the menu is not the price that you pay. You have plus tax plus tip. So it's quite a bit more. The tip alone is like 20%. And then the tax, like it's not nice. So I actually eat out much more here in Dubai, and I order food much more here in Dubai because it's much cheaper. Like I order food today already. So it's something I didn't do much in Canada, and now I do because it's actually cheaper to order food for one person than to buy ingredients in the grocery store.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that.
It's nice. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
convenient.
Yeah, I wish it was like that in more places. Maybe now we can move on to the private podcast. So this is
Yeah.
just for just for members, and it's a much smaller podcast. Okay, so for the bonus podcast, I thought we could talk about some slang. I wonder if you have any
Okay.
Canadian slang that you could share. And if
Oh
you
my
have time,
God.
maybe I can quiz you on some
I'm trying.
British as well. Well, Julie, would you be happy to tell us like where we could find out more about you? If you have like social media, websites, or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is at English ETC underscore with underscore Julie. Maybe you can link it because
Mhm.
it's not the easiest to remember. And on YouTube as well, English etc. with Julie. And my website is englishetc.com. So lots of places you can find me.
Fantastic. Yeah, I will put links to everything just to make it
Yeah,
easier as
perfect.
well. But okay, well, thank you very much. Anything you think
Thank you
we
so
didn't
much.
cover that we should have, or is that all good?
I think honestly that's it. Like I guess the culture in Canada. I spoke about Canadians. One thing is that Canada is very multinational, multicultural, but I mentioned about the culture. I think that extends throughout everyone. That
Mhm.
everyone is respectful and tolerant no matter where they're from. So that's a good thing. But no, other than that, I think we've touched on everything. Yeah.
Well, I learnt a lot, and I'm sure the listeners did as well. So thank you so much for your time and sharing knowledge with us, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll see you later. You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.